Hello there. This is the blog for the crunching sound of the debris and everything under the viewer's feet. Yeah, I actually came about this sound by mistake. I was messing around with the uh, bubble wrap. I was scrunching it up and rustling it around and everything to try and create a sound for the fire at the beginning of the scene, as I actually did with the gunshot sounds. That's how I came about those. Yeah, I was just messing around with it, and I was trying to lower the pitch, um, and get a good sort of low rumbling sound for the fire. Um, what I ended up actually getting was like a crackling, crunching sound from it, which I thought was actually a really good sound to use, because I thought it sounds like glass being crunched, and then linked it to the fact that there's obviously going to be broken glass all over the floor from the explosions outside, and everything, everything that's broken, all the debris inside and outside. So I thought that'd be a really good reason to use it. Yeah, I actually came about it before I even decided against using the sound for the fire. Um, so yeah, I decided to. This was before I decided to not use one for it. So um, yeah, oh, what was I saying? Sorry. Yeah, I started out by taking a short wavelength of it being scrunched around in my hands, and looped that a couple of times so that it was, well, primarily in time with the fire, because that's what I was doing it for. Um, when I decided against doing it for the fire, um, I because obviously I wanted to give it the echo of a sound, I decided to reduce the pitch, so lower the pitch quite a lot. Which, as I said before, gave it quite a crackly sound, and it was quite a sensory effect. It sounded like the metal sort of crunching and bending, um, and the at the beginning as well, it sort of felt like the paper and everything that was on the floor from the money that had been exploded, the paper that we were doing on the floor, sort of scrunching around. Um, so yeah, I decided that I would give the viewer a voice, a sort of a real time juxtaposition um, with the sort of lack of time, if you like, because obviously it's all freeze frame. I wanted to give it something that sort of balances the scales a bit. So obviously all of the other sounds are all going to be echoes of sounds, but I wanted this to be kind of like quite a realistic sound, so it was happening in real time. Um, so yeah, what I did was I firstly got this small sample of the bubble wrap and reduced it by 2,400 cents, so basically 2 octaves. Um, that was done in the time and pitch machine in Logic, and doing that, I didn't actually really need to do anything else apart from a bit of EQ and compression, because it sounded quite gory, but it was sort of fitted the visceral horror type brutality of the film that I wanted to portray. Um, so I didn't actually need to do anything else because it kind of sounded like a bit of bones breaking as well, which is not nice, but yeah. Yeah, I removed the low frequencies from the crunching sound, so it didn't combat the low drone too much. I didn't want it to be sort of a bit muddled between which was which. So I removed a lot of the low end, and added quite a bit of high mid, which emphasised the sound of the sort of the brutality of the sound. It sounded a bit more like it was in your spine. Yeah, I compressed it as well after that, so that there were no unwanted peaks, and that because there weren't any peaks, it sounded like, because it was a continuous sound, it kind of sounded like you were rolling over something. It sounded like the sound was rolling as opposed to just crunching and at certain intervals. Um, yeah, and this actually brought about a new concept which I hadn't thought of, which was it sounded as well. It sort of played a second role. Um, it sounded like the camera on its rig rolling. So obviously the rig would be on wheels, and they could roll the camera, and it just sounded like the camera was on wheels, and it was rolling over this debris because it was a continuous sound, which was actually quite good. Um, which I thought was a very good way of portraying the horrible sound of it. And you'll notice at the beginning when it's pointing at the first guy, it moves away from him, and you can't hear it, and it's as if they're going onto the ground from off the ground, and then it starts. And yeah, you can hear it all the way throughout, crunching and grinding on things that aren't. It gives it quite a sort of deep, fearful sound. I ducked out the sound while the camera wasn't moving, or in this case, the viewer wasn't moving through the scene, because I thought that I did. I mean, I did it with the low drone as well, but I thought that doing that with the sound completely kind of went against what it was there for. So, I mean, the only other time it happened was there were two times. There's one from where it went pointing at the original guy to the fire scene, which is where it stops and then carries on. That's where I began it. And then upstairs, when they're going into the room where the police officer's been taken, he's been struck down, I decided to remove the low drone there, but continue the crunching sound, because it was as if they were rotating the camera around to look into the room. So it's as if it was still on its roller, and obviously rotating round, and that gave it quite a visceral. Again, I use visceral a lot, but it gave it quite a sort of bone crunching sound, and it was on its own as well. That was one of the. I think it's the only sound that you can hear, apart from possibly some breathing. It just sounds. Again, it's the continuation of just the viewer or the camera being on its own. It's being in this scenario, and yeah, I think that added a bit more of a fear element to it, because it sounded more like it was grinding through this, and it just sounded a bit more as if you were in horror. Thank you very much for watching.